Welcome back to Black News Tonight. Thanksgiving is one of the most celebrated holidays in the country, but for many in the Native American community, this day is far from a festive one. We all know the classic fairy tale where English pilgrims and the Wampanoag came together, had a turkey, shared a table, all on equal terms. But if you listen to a Native account of that encounter, you're likely to hear that Thanksgiving symbolizes the starting point of colonization. Our next guest, Dana Hedgpeth, she unpacks that history in her Washington Post article. This tribe helped the Pilgrims survive for their first Thanksgiving. They still regret it 400 years later. Here with an Indigenous perspective on Thanksgiving is Dana Hedgpeth. She is an American Indian and member of the Haliwa-Saponi Tribe in North Carolina. Thank you so much for joining me, Dana. You mentioned in your article that for some Native Americans, for some American Indians, Thanksgiving is considered a day of mourning. Talk to me about that. How do you feel about Thanksgiving?
That's right. Thanks so much for having me. I am a journalist at the Washington Post. I've been there for 21 years. It's gone by crazy fast. And I am a member of the Haliwa-Saponi Tribe of North Carolina. Thanksgiving's an interesting time because I often hear people say, oh, it's the quote-unquote all-American holiday. Everybody can celebrate Thanksgiving. People will say whether you're a newly arrived immigrant from Syria, your family's originally from Jamaica, you're from Michigan, you're from Florida, it's all American. It's interesting. I respect that, but I also respectfully sort of disagree. For Native Americans, I think the Wampanoag activist Frank James probably put it best in 1971 when a speech he wanted to give was literally squashed and he wasn't allowed to give it. He called it the beginning of the end. It was not a good time for our people. Today, many Wampanoags will celebrate by going, instead of celebrating the day itself, they'll celebrate that their culture has survived, that they're resilient people, that they're strong, that they have made it through what was the beginning of colonization, a long, slow genocide and taking of their land. And they'll express themselves at what's known as the National Day of Mourning in Plymouth, where Plymouth Rock is located in a very important part of Pilgrims and their arrival. So it's sort of, I would say, day of mixed feelings for many Native Americans, I think is probably the best way to put it. I think Mother Bear, who is a Wampanoag elder, as mentioned in my story, probably says it best. She says, who doesn't like a good feast? We all like good food, right? So for Native Americans, it's a time to gather with your family, with your friends, but it's really a time to be respectful, have some reflection and thoughts on what that first Pilgrim Thanksgiving in 1621 brought. And it's been a history that is unkind to our people.
Absolutely. And the unkindness, the injustice, does not linger purely in the recesses of history. We know that American Indians still face a lot of social inequality, economic injustice at this very moment. When you think about the condition of Indigenous and Native folk in this country, what are some of the most pressing issues?
Well, I just did another story about that where I talked to 9 incredibly successful Native Americans throughout the country from different tribes and a variety of careers. And we did it as a piece to honor Native Americans for Native American Heritage Month. November, as you know, marks that month. But I picked these 9 folks because in doing stories on Native Americans, I so often hear this from people who say everyone has a myth or stereotype about Native Americans. They think they're either all constrained to reservations or rich and with casino money, and both of those are total myths. There are some very sad economic situations that do need concern. They do need money. They do need justice. They do need help. But we picked 9 very successful Native Americans throughout the country to show Native Americans have also come so far. And we wanted to show how resilient these people are. They still practice their cultural beliefs. They're still incredibly loyal to the tribe, but they live in big cities. Some of them live in small towns. They live in suburbs. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're politicians, they're environmentalists, they're nurses, they're NASA scientists. The feedback that I got on that was so great And then I think many people paused for a moment to reflect and look at those faces and images, and it was powerful to show here's a people who have gone through an incredibly tough history, wiping out their people, taking up their land, genocide, death, war, you name it. They have survived, they have persevered, they're still fighting for their land rights, their water. They're fighting to keep their culture alive, to teach their children for the next generation. And many of the emails and comments I got back was people just reflecting for a moment. And I think they just thought about a people that have been long marginalized and misrepresented. And we wanted to show some faces of real life Indian country. And that's what we did.
Well, one of the people you interviewed in the article mentioned exactly what you're talking about, which is how American Indians resisted colonization. And I think that's an important piece because oftentimes our narratives of even colonial violence or the violence of slavery or the violence of any form of severe oppression is a one direction kind of narrative where we talk about they came, they oppressed us, we lost. When in fact there's always been resistance. At every site of oppression there's been resistance, and there's so many Native Americans who have not only resisted colonial violence, but they've also resisted cultural violence. They've kept cultural traditions alive, practices alive. They've managed to fight and ensure that colonial domination wasn't thorough. What are some ways that people in your community are doing that? How are they keeping their traditions and practices alive?
Look, my children and I participate in competitive powwow dancing, and one of the women we profiled in this piece that I'm talking about, Nikki Bass, also does. She's from a tribe in Virginia. She's Nansemond, and she's a great jingle dress dancer. My kids and I also do that. And the jingle dress, the short history of it was banned in the early 1900s. It was literally banned by the federal government as outlawed. Can you imagine something that's precious to your family, to your history, that has roots, and it was literally banned. You were forbidden to do it. That has an impact on people. The jingle dress is a rich history in the Ojibwe community, where a man is said to have had a vision, a dream. He had a sick daughter, and he was given the idea by the creator to make a dress that would make sounds. And the closer the jingles are together, they make a sound that's almost like rain. I just did a demonstration at my second graders classroom, and we wore our jingle dresses, and people can connect to it. It is a powerful sound. It's a chilling sound. And the kids could get it. Kids, adults can get it. But this, in the last 50 or so years, this dress has really made a comeback, and the competitions of it have made a comeback. And it's powerful. It's a dress about healing. People were doing jingle dress dancing on the internet and doing virtual powwows, when our powwows, which are celebrations, basically like a huge family reunion, we couldn't hold them because of COVID, unfortunately. And it was amazing. There were Facebook pages where people were doing this dance of healing. We've gone through an incredible time, a terrible time the last year and a half with COVID. It's hard. It's hit Native Americans the hardest. And this is the dress that for Native Americans is a symbol across many tribes. There's more than 500 tribes across the country. It's a dress that comes from the Ojibwe people, but they have thankfully shared it, their rich history. And it was just so powerful to see people even being separated doing this dance that is about healing. It's a deep, rich history. So the fact that has survived, again, a resilient, strong people that are determined to keep their culture alive is what we're seeing even today.
Wow, it's a beautiful sight to behold. As we head to commercial, talk to me about the message you'd like all Americans, or the idea, the sentiment that you'd want all Americans to consider as they reflect on Thanksgiving.
Wow, that's a good, big question. I also got a lot of negative comments on the story I wrote about Thanksgiving and the Wampanoags, people saying, well, did they really regret helping the Pilgrims? I talked to enough folks to think that some of them still to this day do regret that. It was a huge change to their life. The Wampanoags have an incredibly rich history that goes back 10,000 years. How many people know the history of their people back 10,000 years? I can guarantee you, very few. When someone comes onto your land as an invader, an imposter, and tells you to basically get off, hurt your family, and you've survived for 10,000 years, I think there might be some regret there. What do I want people to think from this story? I want you to read it, for one. I want you to pause, to think, reflect. I got many comments of people saying that you're trying to make us have white guilt. I'm not trying to make you have anything. We're just laying a story out on the table. We wanted to go and hear the Wampanoag story, so often their side gets overlooked. I had people criticizing and saying, well, you didn't tell the Pilgrim side. This story wasn't about telling the Pilgrim side. That side's been told. We wanted to go and listen. And I want people to
There's no
listen,
shortage of Pilgrim sides
of
the story, you know? Exactly. There's no shortage of the Pilgrim narrative. And so your narrative is a powerful one. It's a necessary intervention. And Dana, we got to run, but thank you so much for stopping by and having this much needed conversation about Thanksgiving.